In 1943, Joel Goldsmith stood at the edge of complete spiritual collapse. The man who would become Christianity's greatest mystical healer was making the exact same devastating mistake you're making right now. He was desperately trying to heal with his human mind instead of resting in divine consciousness. This single error nearly destroyed his spiritual mission before it truly began. For agonizing months, Joel struggled with repeated failures, mounting doubts, and the growing horrifying realization that everything he thought he knew about spiritual healing was completely wrong. His personal human will was actively fighting against divine grace. But in one life-changing, transformative moment of complete surrender, Joel discovered the revolutionary secret that changed absolutely everything. He stopped trying to make something happen through human effort and started allowing something divine to happen through spiritual receptivity. This dramatic shift from mental effort to spiritual receptivity became the unshakable foundation of mystical Christianity. Today, I'm going to reveal exactly what Joel learned in that moment of crisis, because you're making the same mistake that almost cost him everything. And it's costing you your spiritual power right now. The mistake Joel made is the exact same mistake every sincere spiritual seeker makes without exception. We desperately try to use our limited personal will to access unlimited divine power. We pray harder, affirm louder, visualize clearer, thinking that more human effort automatically equals more spiritual results. But Joel discovered that spiritual law works in complete opposition to human logic. The moment he stopped trying to heal anyone, genuine healing happened effortlessly. The instant he stopped trying to demonstrate supply, true abundance flowed naturally. When he ceased trying to find God, God found him immediately. This wasn't giving up in defeat. It was giving in to a higher intelligence that already knew the perfect solution. The secret Joel uncovered was this revolutionary truth. Your consciousness, not your thinking mind, is the only true instrument of divine expression in the material world. Your mind thinks, plans, worries, and struggles constantly. Your consciousness simply receives, allows, and expresses divine perfection naturally. One fights desperately against divine order. The other aligns perfectly with infinite intelligence and allows miracles to unfold. Here's exactly what Joel realized about the profound difference between consciousness and mental effort that changes everything. When you try to heal with your thinking mind, you're attempting to use limited personal power to accomplish unlimited spiritual work. It's like trying to lift yourself off the ground by pulling on your own bootstraps. The harder you try through human effort, the more spiritually exhausted you become, and the further you move from actual divine demonstration. But when you work directly from consciousness, you become a perfect transparency for unlimited divine action to flow through you without any personal interference whatsoever. You don't heal anyone through personal effort. You don't demonstrate anything through human will. You simply maintain the pure consciousness of spiritual wholeness, and wholeness appears automatically in human experience. You hold the consciousness of infinite abundance, and divine supply manifests naturally. Joel called this the crucial difference between taking anxious thought and being established in spiritual consciousness. Taking thought is frantic mental activity, endless planning, constant worrying, desperately trying to make something happen through personal force. Being in consciousness is resting peacefully in eternal spiritual truth, knowing with absolute certainty that I am is the only real power present in every situation. This isn't passive resignation or spiritual laziness. It's active receptivity that allows unlimited divine intelligence to work through you completely unobstructed. You're not doing nothing spiritually. You're allowing everything divine to flow through your consciousness as perfect human experience. And that fundamental shift makes all the difference between spiritual struggle and effortless demonstration of divine harmony in your daily life. The practical application of Joel's revolutionary discovery changes absolutely everything about how you approach any spiritual work. Instead of trying to heal a persistent headache, you recognize that in pure consciousness, there simply is no headache, because perfection is the only reality. Instead of trying to demonstrate money through human effort, you rest completely in the consciousness that I am is infinite supply itself, appearing as your every need fulfilled perfectly. You stop fighting against problems and start ignoring them from the higher perspective of spiritual truth. Let me share a powerful story that proves Joel's consciousness approach works even in the most challenging circumstances imaginable. Maria was a devoted spiritual student who had been struggling with chronic debilitating pain for many years. She had tried every healing method available, attended every service regularly, read every spiritual book, but nothing changed in her condition despite years of sincere spiritual effort. Maria was making Joel's original devastating mistake. She was using her thinking mind to try to heal her physical body, affirming health while secretly believing in sickness, declaring wholeness while experiencing constant pain. Her desperate mental effort was actually reinforcing the very condition she wanted to heal most. Then Maria learned Joel's revolutionary secret of consciousness. Instead of trying to heal her persistent pain, she began to rest completely in the consciousness that God is the only presence and power. She stopped trying to make her body well through human effort and started recognizing that in spiritual reality, she had never actually been sick. She withdrew all spiritual reality from the appearance of sickness and rested in the truth of divine perfection. Within just a few weeks of this new approach, the chronic pain began to diminish noticeably. Within several months, it was completely gone forever. But here's what's absolutely crucial for your understanding. Maria didn't heal her body through personal effort. She stopped believing her body needed healing. She withdrew spiritual reality from the appearance of sickness and rested in the eternal truth of divine wholeness. Another student of Joel's consciousness principles, Robert, was facing complete financial collapse. His business was failing rapidly, debts were mounting dangerously, and paralyzing fear was consuming his thoughts. Like Joel in 1943, Robert was desperately trying to use spiritual principles to fix material problems through human effort. Robert spent many hours each day affirming abundance, visualizing success, and trying to demonstrate prosperity through mental concentration and personal will. But the harder he tried through human effort, the worse his financial situation became. His frantic mental effort was operating from the fundamental belief that he lacked something essential that needed to be obtained through personal struggle. When Robert learned to properly apply Joel's consciousness technique, everything shifted dramatically. Instead of trying to get money through human effort, he began to rest completely in the consciousness that I am is infinite supply itself. He stopped seeing himself as poor and started recognizing his true divine nature as abundance itself. The transformation took several months of consistent practice, but it was absolutely complete. Business opportunities appeared unexpectedly, debts resolved mysteriously, and abundance flowed naturally without personal effort. Robert had discovered that consciousness of supply is supply itself, not merely the avenue to supply. Sarah's marriage was on the brink of divorce when she discovered Joel's transformative teachings. Her husband was emotionally distant, communication had completely broken down, and both were ready to give up entirely. Sarah had been praying desperately for her marriage to be healed, but her prayers were filled with fear and desperation rather than spiritual consciousness. Sarah was trying to heal her relationship through mental effort and emotional pleading. She was seeing her marriage as broken and trying to fix it through spiritual techniques applied with human will. This approach was actually reinforcing the appearance of separation and discord in her relationship. When Sarah learned Joel's consciousness method, she stopped trying to heal her marriage through personal effort and started recognizing the spiritual reality of divine love as the only true presence. She ceased seeing her husband as unloving and began to know him as the perfect expression of divine love itself. The change in their relationship was gradual but absolutely profound. As Sarah maintained the consciousness of divine love, her husband began to respond completely differently. Communication improved naturally, intimacy returned spontaneously, and their marriage became stronger than ever before. These transformation stories reveal the unlimited power of Joel's consciousness technique. When you stop trying to change appearances and start recognizing spiritual reality, appearances change automatically. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with you? Beyond Joel's foundational consciousness technique, there are powerful complementary practices that significantly deepen your spiritual receptivity and accelerate your spiritual development. The first is what Joel called practicing the presence of God continuously throughout your daily activities and experiences. Instead of turning to God only when serious problems arise, you cultivate continuous recognition of divine presence in every moment. While working, you know with certainty that I am is the infinite intelligence expressing perfectly through all your activities and accomplishments. While resting, you recognize that divine peace is your natural permanent state of being. This transformative practice turns ordinary moments into sacred experiences. You're not trying to bring God into your separate life. You're recognizing that God is already the very life you're living. This recognition gradually dissolves the fundamental sense of separation from God that creates most human problems and limitations. The beauty of practicing the presence is that it requires no special time, place, or circumstances. Every single moment becomes a precious opportunity to recognize spiritual reality. The second powerful complementary technique Joel taught is going within for specific divine guidance whenever you face important decisions or challenging circumstances. Instead of trying to figure out what to do through human reasoning, you turn within to receive perfect divine direction. This isn't asking God to tell you what to do as if you were separate from divine intelligence. It's recognizing that divine intelligence is actually your own true intelligence operating. You quiet the personal thinking mind, rest in the consciousness of I am, and allow the perfect answer to unfold naturally. Sometimes divine guidance comes as a clear inner knowing, sometimes as an intuitive feeling, sometimes as circumstances that naturally open or close opportunities. The key is trusting completely that divine intelligence knows exactly what you need to know precisely when you need to know it. Joel emphasized that this inner guidance is always available without exception, but it can only be received in consciousness, never accessed through mental effort or personal struggle. The quieter your thinking mind becomes, the clearer divine direction flows. The third essential technique Joel used is releasing personal sense completely in every situation. Personal sense is the false belief that you are a separate individual who must protect, provide for, and heal yourself through personal effort and human struggle. This limiting belief blocks the natural flow of divine grace through your human experience. When you release personal sense completely, you stop trying to be the doer and recognize I am as the only true actor in every situation. You cease trying to live your life through personal will and allow divine life to live itself perfectly as your experience. This isn't becoming passive or irresponsible. It's becoming completely transparent to infinite divine activity expressing through you naturally. Joel taught that every human problem stems from personal sense trying to handle what only divine consciousness can resolve perfectly. When you release the belief that you must handle anything personally, divine handling appears automatically and effortlessly in your experience. This release happens gradually through consistent daily practice and growing spiritual understanding. Each time you catch yourself trying to handle something through personal effort, you pause immediately, release it completely to divine consciousness, and rest in the awareness that I am knows exactly what to do. These three complementary techniques work together harmoniously to establish what Joel called the consciousness of I am. This isn't a belief or a thought, it's a living awareness that divine being is your being, divine consciousness is your consciousness, divine life is your life. When this consciousness becomes firmly established through practice, you naturally stop making the mistake that almost destroyed Joel. You cease trying to use spiritual principles to improve human conditions and start recognizing that spiritual reality is the only true reality. This recognition transforms everything without any personal effort whatsoever. Health appears because you know yourself as the expression of divine wholeness. Abundance flows because you recognize yourself as infinite supply. Love expresses because you know yourself as divine love itself. Even with clear understanding of Joel's teachings, many sincere students face common obstacles that can seriously derail their spiritual progress. The first major obstacle is impatience with the gradual process of spiritual unfoldment. You desperately want immediate dramatic results, but consciousness develops gradually through consistent practice. Joel himself experienced this challenging obstacle during his early years of spiritual development. He would practice the presence faithfully for days or weeks, then become deeply discouraged when dramatic healing didn't occur immediately. This impatience actually interfered with the natural unfoldment of consciousness. The solution is understanding that every single moment of recognition, every instance of resting in consciousness, is building powerful spiritual momentum that will eventually demonstrate in human experience. You may not see immediate changes in outer appearances, but consciousness is establishing itself more firmly with each sincere practice. Trust completely that divine timing is always perfect timing. Some demonstrations happen quickly, others unfold slowly over time. Your only work is to maintain consciousness regardless of appearances. The second common obstacle is mixing spiritual consciousness with personal mental effort. You'll catch yourself practicing Joel's techniques correctly, then slipping back into trying to make something happen through personal will and human effort. This mixture seriously dilutes the effectiveness of consciousness. Joel warned against this spiritual confusion repeatedly. He taught that you cannot serve two masters simultaneously. Either you're resting peacefully in consciousness, or you're working from personal effort, but you cannot do both at the same time effectively. The mixture creates internal conflict and significantly delays demonstration of harmony. When you notice yourself trying to help consciousness along through mental effort, simply stop immediately and return to complete rest in spiritual truth. Release whatever you are trying to accomplish through personal will and re-establish your awareness in the truth of I Am as the only power and presence. This is not spiritual failure. It's simply part of the natural learning process that every student experiences. The third obstacle is expecting consciousness to work according to your personal timeline and preferences. You may desperately want healing to appear in your physical body, but consciousness expresses as improved relationships. You may expect supply through your current job, but abundance comes through completely unexpected channels. Joel learned that consciousness always demonstrates perfectly, but never according to limited personal expectations. Divine intelligence knows the perfect form of expression for each situation, and this form may be completely different from what the human mind anticipates or desires. Your role is to maintain consciousness faithfully and allow divine intelligence to choose the perfect form of expression. When you insist on specific outcomes, you severely limit the infinite ways that consciousness can manifest in your experience. Trust completely that whatever consciousness produces is exactly what you need, even if it's not what you personally wanted. Divine wisdom sees the complete picture and always provides the highest good for all concerned. The final common obstacle is using Joel's techniques to improve personal sense instead of dissolving it completely. This happens when you practice consciousness in order to get a better human experience rather than recognizing your true divine nature. Joel taught that the real purpose of spiritual practice is not to improve the human, but to realize that the divine is the only identity you actually have. When you use consciousness to get better health, more money, or improved relationships, you're still operating from personal sense. True spiritual practice involves recognizing that you are already whole, abundant, and loved in consciousness. The purpose of Joel's techniques is to rest in this recognition, not to achieve it through effort. This recognition then appears as improved human experiences automatically. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment. Which obstacle are you ready to transform now? Advanced application of Joel's teachings involves integrating consciousness into the most challenging areas of daily life. Take your work situation as a perfect example. Instead of seeing your job as separate from spiritual life, you recognize that I Am is the intelligence, skill, and supply expressing through your career. This doesn't mean becoming passive about career development or professional growth. It means approaching work from consciousness rather than personal ambition and ego. You do your absolute best while knowing that divine intelligence is the true doer. You provide excellent service while recognizing that I Am is the server. When workplace challenges arise, instead of fighting them mentally or emotionally, you turn immediately to consciousness. You recognize that divine harmony is the only law operating, regardless of outer appearances. This consciousness often dissolves conflicts before they fully develop into serious problems. One student applied this approach during a major corporate restructuring that threatened her position. Instead of fighting the changes through human effort, she maintained consciousness of divine order operating perfectly. She was promoted to a significantly better position, while many others were let go during the restructuring. Family relationships provide another challenging arena for advanced consciousness practice. When family members trigger old emotional patterns or create difficult challenges, Instead of reacting personally, you turn to consciousness. You recognize divine love expressing through every individual, regardless of their current behavior or attitudes. This doesn't mean accepting inappropriate behavior or enabling dysfunction. It means seeing through the human appearance to the divine reality of every person, while taking appropriate human action when necessary for protection or boundaries. Joel taught that when you consistently see others from consciousness rather than personal judgment, they begin to express their divine nature more clearly in your experience. Your consciousness of their spiritual perfection calls forth their perfection and dissolves discord. One practitioner used this approach with her alcoholic brother, who had been destroying his life for years. Instead of trying to change him through human effort, she held the consciousness of his divine wholeness. Over several months of consistent practice, he sought treatment voluntarily and recovered completely. Health challenges offer perhaps the most demanding arena for consciousness practice. When symptoms appear or medical diagnoses are given, the natural temptation is to fight the condition mentally or try to heal the body through spiritual effort. Joel's approach is radically different from conventional spiritual healing methods. Instead of seeing yourself as sick and trying to become well through effort, you recognize that in consciousness, wholeness is your permanent, unchanging nature. You don't deny what appears to be happening in human experience, but you refuse to give it spiritual reality or power. This practice requires consistent return to consciousness whenever fear or symptoms try to claim your attention and disturb your peace. You acknowledge what appears to be happening while resting firmly in the knowledge of what is actually true spiritually. A longtime student faced a serious cancer diagnosis that appeared life-threatening. Instead of fighting the disease through human effort, she maintained consciousness of her divine wholeness. The cancer completely disappeared within months, but more importantly, she discovered unshakable peace regardless of physical appearances. Financial challenges provide another opportunity for advanced consciousness practice. When bills mount or income decreases, instead of struggling to get more money through human effort, you rest in consciousness. You recognize that I Am is infinite supply, appearing as your daily needs perfectly met. This approach seems completely impractical to the human mind, but Joel proved its effectiveness throughout his entire ministry. He never asked for money, yet always had abundant supply. He rested in consciousness and allowed divine supply to appear naturally. You practice this by releasing financial concerns to consciousness while taking appropriate human steps. You pay bills, seek employment, and manage resources wisely, but you do these things from consciousness rather than fear. One practitioner applied this during extended unemployment. Instead of desperately seeking work through human effort, he maintained consciousness of divine intelligence expressing through his career. The perfect position appeared with better pay and conditions than his previous job. As consciousness becomes firmly established through consistent practice, you begin to experience what Joel called the mystical life. This is life lived from constant awareness of your divine nature rather than personal sense of separation from God. In the mystical life, problems don't disappear from human experience, but your relationship to them transforms completely. Challenges become opportunities to deepen consciousness. Difficulties become invitations to release more personal sense and rest more completely in I Am. You discover that external harmony is not the ultimate goal of spiritual practice. Internal recognition of truth is the goal. When you know yourself as consciousness itself, external appearances lose their power to disturb your peace or diminish your joy. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to human experience or withdrawing from life. It means experiencing human life from the perspective of consciousness rather than personal sense. You engage fully in life while remaining spiritually free from personal attachment to outcomes. The mystical life transforms your entire approach to helping others spiritually. Instead of trying to heal people or solve their problems through human effort, you maintain consciousness of their divine wholeness and allow that recognition to bless their experience naturally. Joel discovered that the most effective healing work happens when you completely forget about the person's problem and rest in the consciousness of God's presence. Your consciousness becomes a perfect transparency for divine love to touch their experience. This approach requires releasing all personal responsibility for others, while remaining available to serve as consciousness directs. You don't fix anyone through human effort, but you hold the consciousness that allows divine fixing to occur naturally. Many students find this the most challenging aspect of mystical living. Personal sense desperately wants to help through human effort, but consciousness serves through divine being. Learning this crucial difference transforms both your service and your effectiveness in helping others experience healing. After decades of consistent practice, advanced students discover what Joel called the natural life. This is living from consciousness so consistently that it becomes completely effortless. You no longer have to remember to practice the presence, you simply live as presence itself. The techniques that once required discipline become natural as breathing. Recognizing I am becomes as automatic as physical breathing. Resting in consciousness becomes your normal state rather than something you do during spiritual practice times. In this natural life, the mistake that almost destroyed Joel becomes completely impossible. You couldn't try to use personal will for spiritual work because personal will has dissolved into divine will. You couldn't make spiritual effort because consciousness has become your effortless nature. This is not a distant goal, but a present possibility available right now. Every moment you rest in consciousness instead of personal effort, you're living the natural life. Every instance of recognizing I am instead of trying to become something, you're expressing mystical consciousness. You now understand the mistake that almost destroyed Joel Goldsmith and how it's been destroying your spiritual effectiveness. You've learned the secret that transformed his crisis into his greatest discovery. Consciousness, not effort, is the key to spiritual demonstration. The path forward is clear, but requires unwavering commitment. Stop trying to use spiritual techniques to improve human conditions through personal effort. Start resting in the consciousness that recognizes spiritual reality as the only true reality. Let this recognition transform your experience naturally. Remember, you are not a human being seeking a spiritual experience through effort. You are consciousness itself, appearing as human experience. When this recognition becomes firmly established, everything Joel taught becomes your natural expression, and his mistake becomes impossible to make. Begin today by choosing consciousness over effort in one specific area of your life. Rest in I am instead of trying to become something. Allow divine intelligence to handle what personal will cannot accomplish. Your transformation starts with this choice. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, I am transformed, to confirm your new path.
Have you ever wondered why Jesus would make the astonishing declaration, "You are God's," and what it could possibly mean for your life today? This isn't just some abstract theological concept. It's a revolutionary understanding that has the power to transform everything about how you experience your spiritual journey. Has this ever happened to you? You find yourself praying desperately, almost begging for divine intervention in your life, yet feeling like your words are bouncing off the ceiling? There's a reason for that disconnect, and it lies hidden within one of Jesus' most misunderstood statements. When Jesus proclaimed, "You are God's," he wasn't speaking in poetic metaphor or making some grandiose religious claim. He was revealing a profound truth about your actual identity. A truth so revolutionary that once you truly grasp it, your entire relationship with the divine shifts fundamentally. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might completely reshape how you understand your place in the cosmos. Most of us have been conditioned to approach spirituality from a position of separation and lack. We've been taught to view ourselves as somehow distant from the divine, like orphans pleading with a stranger for help or intervention. We beg, we plead, we bargain, all from this underlying assumption that we are somehow disconnected from the very source of life itself. But this is precisely what makes Jesus' approach so radically different. When you examine his words and actions closely, you notice something remarkable. Jesus never begged. He never pleaded. He spoke with the unwavering confidence of someone who fully understood his relationship with the divine source. This wasn't arrogance or spiritual pride. It was the natural expression of someone who recognized an eternal truth that existed before time began. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world, and if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. What Jesus understood, and what he was desperately trying to help us understand, is that the divine nature isn't something external to you that you need to somehow reach through spiritual effort. It's your original nature, your true identity, beneath all the layers of conditioning and false beliefs about separation. When you truly grasp what Jesus meant by declaring your divine nature, everything transforms. Your prayers shift from desperate pleas to conscious recognition. Your spiritual practice evolves from striving to allowing. Your entire experience changes from struggle into natural, effortless unfolding. Imagine for a moment what your life would look like if you approached each day, each challenge, each relationship from the consciousness that Jesus had when he declared, "You are God's." How would your experience change if you truly lived from that understanding? What would fall away and what would naturally emerge in its place? The truth is, we've been reading these words through the lens of religious formality for so long that we've missed their revolutionary power. But when you strip away centuries of theological interpretation and truly see what Jesus was pointing to, what you discover is nothing short of a complete revelation about your true identity. The declaration, "You are God's," in Jesus' consciousness wasn't merely a lofty theological concept. It was a direct recognition of source, expression, and substance. Think about this revelation for a moment. Just as divinity expresses through all creation, the divine expresses through you. This mindset shift is the hidden key that unlocks a completely different journey in your spiritual life. The profound truth is that you are not separate from the divine, desperately seeking some external connection. Like a cosmic orphan, you are the very expression of divinity itself, living and breathing through divine inheritance right now in this very moment. This is not spiritual theory. This is the fundamental reality behind your existence, regardless of whether you've recognized it yet or not. This transformational understanding becomes even clearer when we look at another statement Jesus made that perfectly aligns with "You are God's." When he proclaimed, "I and my Father are one," he wasn't making a special claim unique to himself alone. This was never meant to be an exclusive revelation that applied only to Jesus. Rather, he was unveiling the universal truth about every human being's relationship with the divine source. The revolutionary impact of this understanding is that this oneness is not something you need to achieve through decades of spiritual practice, meditation, or religious devotion. It's not a distant goal to be reached after years of effort. This oneness is the very foundation of your existence. It's already complete, already whole, already perfect. Your spiritual journey isn't about becoming something you're not. It's about recognizing and accepting what has always been true. Behind the scenes of your daily human experience lies this profound reality that most spiritual seekers miss entirely. We've been conditioned to view spirituality as a path towards something, a journey of becoming, when in fact it's a process of unveiling what already is. The decisions we make from this understanding are entirely different from those made from a mindset of separation. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring a powerful metaphor that illuminates this truth in a way that's impossible to forget. Imagine the vast ocean and its countless waves. A wave is not separate from the ocean trying desperately to become oceanic. It already is ocean, temporarily expressing in wave form. In the same way, you are not a human being trying to reach God. You are divine life temporarily expressing in human form. If this message about your divine nature resonated with you, hit subscribe to join our community of seekers exploring these profound spiritual truths together. This revelation completely transforms how you approach every aspect of your life, from prayer to purpose, from healing to relationships. When you begin to live from this understanding, everything shifts. If you're feeling a resonance with this truth deep within you right now, write in the comments, "I am divine expression." This ocean metaphor isn't merely a beautiful analogy, it's a profound revelation about the nature of reality itself. The wave doesn't need to strive or struggle to become more oceanic, it simply needs to recognize what it already is. The wave's entire existence, substance and power come from the ocean itself. Its very being is oceanic in nature. Similarly, your entire being, your consciousness, your life force, your creativity, all of it stems from the divine source expressing itself through your unique human form. This is what "you are God's" truly means in mystical Christianity. And when this understanding takes root in your consciousness, it catalyzes a complete transformation in how you experience life. The journey shifts from seeking something outside yourself to recognizing what's already within and expressing through you. Joel Goldsmith, one of the great mystical teachers of the 20th century, revealed something profound about this. Understanding. He taught that grasping your divine nature dissolves the root cause of all human suffering, which is the belief in separation. Think about that revelation for a moment. The primary source of our pain, our anxiety, our sense of lack and limitation, all stem from this single misperception that we are somehow separate from our divine source. When you begin living from the consciousness that the divine is your actual source and substance, not just poetically or metaphorically, but literally, everything changes. You stop approaching life from a mindset of scarcity and separation. You stop begging and pleading for what you need, as though addressing some distant deity who might or might not respond. Instead, you start receiving naturally, recognizing that what you need is already present within the divine flow of your being. This shift in awareness creates a profound impact in how you navigate life's challenges. You stop efforting and struggling against the current of life, and you start allowing the divine nature to flow through you naturally and effortlessly. This doesn't mean your human life suddenly becomes problem-free, but rather that you approach those problems from an entirely different state of consciousness. Behind the scenes of this transformation is a complete recalibration of how you relate to the divine. Instead of viewing yourself as a separate entity, desperately trying to connect with God, you recognize yourself as an individualized expression of that same divine life. The boundary between you and divine begins to dissolve, and you experience a wholeness that has actually been present all along. This is not about inflating the human ego or claiming some special status. It's about recognizing your true identity beyond the personal sense of self that feels separate and limited. It's about aligning your conscious awareness with the deeper reality of your being. When you live from this understanding, your prayers, your healing work, your relationships all take on a completely different quality. If you've experienced moments of this profound sense of oneness, even briefly, type "I felt this oneness" in the comments below. Now let's explore what happens when this profound understanding begins to shape your everyday practices, particularly in how you approach prayer. The practical power of this realization becomes crystal clear when you're facing life's inevitable challenges and difficulties. Consider the stark contrast. A person who perceives divinity as distant and separate naturally prays from that mindset. "Please God, help me with this problem." Their entire approach stems from a consciousness of separation, lack and dependency on an external power. It's the prayer of someone who fundamentally sees themselves as cut off from the divine source, but someone who has awakened to the truth that Jesus revealed when he said, "You are God's," prays in an entirely different way. Their prayer isn't about begging an external deity for intervention. It's about recognizing what's already present. They acknowledge that divine wisdom isn't something distant they need to acquire or convince to help them. It's already present within as their true nature and inheritance. This revelation completely revolutionizes the prayer experience. This shift in consciousness creates a radical transformation in your spiritual practice. Prayer evolves from a desperate plea to a powerful recognition. It becomes less about asking and more about acknowledging what already is. This mindset shift doesn't just change your words, it alters the entire energy and effectiveness of your spiritual connection. The hidden truth behind Jesus' healing ministry reveals this principle in action. When we examine how Jesus approached healing, we discover something remarkable. He never begged God to intervene from some distant heaven. He never pleaded for divine assistance as though it were separate from him. Instead, he simply acknowledged the divine presence right there in the situation. Jesus recognized a fundamental principle: where divine presence is acknowledged, wholeness must naturally express. Where divinity flows unobstructed by beliefs in separation, the expression of that divinity is already complete by the very nature of the relationship itself. This wasn't miraculous in the way we typically think. It was the natural manifestation of spiritual law working through someone who fully understood his divine identity. Behind the scenes of every healing Jesus performed was this recognition of divine presence, not as something to be called down from heaven, but as the very substance and reality of the person standing before him. He saw beyond the appearance of disease or limitation to the divine reality that was always present but obscured by human belief in separation. This journey of revelation isn't about acquiring special powers or becoming superhuman. It's about removing the veils of misperception that have hidden your true nature from yourself. When you begin to grasp what Jesus meant by "you are God's," healing becomes less about fixing something broken and more about revealing the wholeness that was never actually lost. If you've ever experienced a moment where simply shifting your perception transformed a situation without any external change occurring, write "perception is everything" in the comments. This profound shift, from seeing yourself as separate from the divine to recognizing your oneness with it, completely revolutionizes your entire spiritual journey. For your entire life, you've likely been taught to seek God's help as if you were fundamentally separated from divine supply. This seeking mindset creates an endless spiritual quest, always reaching for something that seems just beyond your grasp. But here's the breakthrough revelation: divine resources aren't something you need to hunt down, earn, or convince to come your way. They're your inheritance through the simple fact of relationship. Just as a child naturally inherits traits and resources from their parents without having to beg for them, you naturally have access to divine qualities through your essential connection to the source. When this understanding truly takes root in your consciousness, your entire prayer life undergoes a remarkable transformation. It evolves from begging into recognition, from anxious effort into restful knowing, from desperate pleading into peaceful receiving. The entire energy of your spiritual practice shifts from striving to allowing, from seeking to finding what was always present. This mindset transformation doesn't happen intellectually, it happens experientially. It's not about adopting a new belief system, but about awakening to a deeper reality that was always true before you recognized it. The decisions you make from this place of understanding create entirely different results than those made from a consciousness of separation. Here is the secret that changes everything about your spiritual journey. When you pray acknowledging "you are God's" as Jesus meant it, you're not trying to get God to do something for you or convince divine power to intervene in your life. You are simply remembering what is already true. This revelation completely revolutionizes your approach to prayer, healing, and manifesting. Divine life isn't something that might flow to you someday if you're worthy enough. It's already flowing through you right now. Divine wisdom isn't a distant quality you need to acquire through decades of spiritual practice. It's already present within you as your true mind. Divine substance isn't separate from you. It's already expressing as your very being, right here, right now, in this moment. Behind the scenes of all effective spiritual practice is this fundamental recognition of present reality rather than future hope. The great spiritual masters throughout history weren't people who mastered techniques for manipulating divine energy. They were individuals who recognized and lived from the truth of what already is. Subscribe now to continue this journey of spiritual awakening as we explore what it truly means to live from the understanding that you are God's. This hidden truth about your divine nature doesn't mean your human experience suddenly becomes perfect or problem-free, but it does mean you approach those human challenges from a completely different level of consciousness. Instead of facing life's difficulties from a place of separation, lack, and limitation, you face them from a recognition of the divine resources that are already present within your being. The impact of this understanding goes far beyond theory. It creates a tangible shift in how you experience your daily life. Your sense of identity expands beyond the limited human personality to include the divine qualities that are your true inheritance and nature. If you've experienced even a glimpse of this profound truth that you are not separate from divine source, but are its direct expression, type "I am divine expression" in the comments below. Let me share what makes this understanding so powerful. It's not just philosophical or theoretical, but intensely practical. When this divine realization truly dawns in your consciousness, you begin to experience tangible shifts in your everyday reality. Healing happens naturally, not because you've mastered some advanced technique, but because you've remembered the truth of who you are as divine expression in human form. This transformation doesn't require manipulating external forces or convincing God to help you. It simply flows from alignment with reality. Think about what happens when you remove a dam from a river. The water doesn't need to be taught how to flow. It simply returns to its natural state. Similarly, when you remove the mental barriers of separation, divine qualities express through you naturally as your authentic state of being. People who embrace this understanding often report remarkable breakthroughs in areas where they've struggled for years. Supply appears more effortlessly. Relationships harmonize spontaneously. Chronic conditions that resisted conventional treatment begin to resolve. But here's the crucial insight that prevents disappointment on this journey. This recognition of your divine nature doesn't always produce immediate physical results or instant miracles. What it does produce is an immediate shift in consciousness that then gradually manifests in your outer experience over time. This is realistic spirituality, not magical thinking that promises overnight transformation. The journey unfolds naturally, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, depending on how deeply ingrained the patterns of separation consciousness have been in your life. Behind the scenes of every authentic healing is this fundamental principle. Inner transformation precedes outer manifestation. Your consciousness shifts first, and then your circumstances begin to reflect that shift. The timeline varies for each person and situation, but the principle remains constant. This understanding helps you avoid the discouragement that comes from expecting instant results while still maintaining complete faith in the process. Consider how a seed transforms into a plant. The moment the seed is planted and watered, its transformation begins, but invisibly beneath the surface. For days, sometimes weeks, nothing appears to be happening, but profound changes are occurring at the invisible level before any visible growth appears. Your spiritual awakening follows this same natural pattern. The recognition of your divine nature initiates an immediate inner transformation that will eventually manifest outwardly, but in divine timing rather than human expectation. This perspective completely revolutionizes how you approach healing, abundance, relationships, and every other aspect of human experience. Instead of desperately seeking external fixes or magical solutions, you focus on cultivating the consciousness from which all authentic change emerges. You become less concerned with manipulating effects and more focused on living from cause, from the recognition of your divine nature as expressed in Jesus' powerful declaration, "You are God's." This doesn't mean you ignore practical action or responsible choices in your human experience. Rather, those actions now flow from a completely different mindset, one of abundance rather than scarcity, wholeness rather than brokenness, divine intelligence rather than limited human thinking. If you've experienced a situation where inner transformation led to outer changes in your life, type "inner creates outer" in the comments below. Now I want to explore what might be the most profound dimension of understanding Jesus' declaration, "You are God's." The radical recognition that you inherit divine nature, not human limitation. This revelation completely transforms what you believe is your natural state of being. Most of us have been conditioned to accept limitation, lack, struggle, and fear as our default human condition. We've been taught that we must strive and struggle to acquire qualities like peace, wisdom, love, and abundance. But this revolutionary understanding flips that entire paradigm. Peace is not something distant that you must acquire through years of spiritual practice or struggle. It is your inheritance, your natural state as divine expression. Wisdom is not something you fundamentally lack that must be painfully accumulated. It is your birthright, flowing naturally from your divine nature. The same applies to every divine quality: abundance, joy, love, creativity, and strength. This perspective creates a complete mindset revolution. When this realization becomes your living consciousness rather than just an intellectual concept, you stop operating from fear-based decisions and begin living from divine assurance. Your actions flow from a completely different source, not from the desperate need to get something you lack, but from the overflow of what you already possess in your divine nature. Behind the scenes of this transformation is a fundamental shift in identity. You no longer see yourself primarily as a limited human personality struggling to connect with divinity. Instead, you recognize yourself as divine expression, temporarily experiencing human form. This doesn't make you arrogant or separate you from humanity. It actually connects you more deeply with all life by recognizing the same divine presence expressing through everyone and everything. But this profound truth requires more than intellectual understanding. It needs to become your lived experience. That's where practical application becomes essential. Let me share a powerful practice that helps anchor this recognition in your daily consciousness. Begin by sitting quietly each morning for just 10-15 minutes before your day unfolds. This isn't complicated meditation requiring special techniques, it's simply quiet recognition. The revolutionary aspect is that you don't ask God for anything during this time. Instead, you simply acknowledge the truth. I am divine expression right now. My breath, my consciousness, my very being in this moment is divine life expressing. As thoughts of problems, concerns, or limitations naturally arise, don't fight them or try to suppress them. Instead, gently return to recognition. Divine presence is my true nature. Whatever appears as challenge or lack in my human experience, the divine reality of wholeness and abundance is present now as the truth of my being. This practice isn't about creating something new, it's about recognizing what already is. You're not trying to manufacture divine qualities through affirmation or visualization. You're acknowledging the reality that exists beneath the appearance of limitation. This distinction makes all the difference in the effectiveness of your practice. If you've tried positive thinking techniques without lasting results, comment below with recognition over affirmation to share how this approach feels different to you. Let me share another powerful practice that transforms how you move through your daily life while living from the recognition that you are God's. Throughout your day, particularly in those moments when you feel yourself straining against circumstances or becoming anxious about situations, pause for just a moment. Take one conscious breath, then silently acknowledge this truth. Divine intelligence is operating in this situation right now. This simple practice creates a remarkable shift in your experience. You'll literally feel yourself releasing the weight of trying to control outcomes through limited human will alone. This momentary pause and recognition interrupts the habitual pattern of separation consciousness that creates so much unnecessary suffering in our lives. Think of it as a pattern interrupt that shifts you from the limited human perspective to the broader divine perspective in an instant. This isn't about denying or ignoring real challenges. It's about approaching them from a completely different level of consciousness. The breakthrough happens when you realize you don't have to solve every problem through human effort alone. There is a higher intelligence, a divine wisdom that is already operating in every situation when you step aside and allow it to flow. A woman named Sarah practiced this during a particularly stressful work situation where everything seemed to be falling apart. Instead of pushing harder with human will and getting more frustrated, she paused several times throughout the day to acknowledge, divine intelligence is operating here right now. Within hours, solutions began appearing that no one had considered. This wasn't coincidence. It was the natural result of shifting from separation consciousness to recognition of divine presence. Now, I want to reveal what might be the most profound dimension of living from the understanding that you are God's, learning to live from cause rather than effect. In essence, this means training yourself to recognize that your divine nature is the invisible reality behind all visible forms and circumstances in your life. When you look at your bank account, practice seeing beyond the numbers, which are just effects, to the infinite substance that is your true source, which is cause. When you look at your body, see beyond the appearance to the divine life that animates it. This isn't denial of human reality, it's recognition of a deeper dimension that is equally real but usually overlooked. This perspective revolutionizes how you respond to circumstances. Instead of constantly reacting to effects, the visible conditions and circumstances that appear in your life, you learn to live from consciousness of cause, the divine reality that precedes and produces those outer conditions. This journey of revelation shifts you from being a victim of circumstances to being consciously aligned with the creative principle that shapes reality. Living from this level of consciousness doesn't make you passive or unrealistic about practical matters. You still take appropriate human action, but those actions now stem from a completely different awareness. They flow from recognition rather than reaction, from abundance rather than scarcity, from trust rather than fear. If you've ever experienced a moment where shifting your perception of a situation completely transformed your experience without the situation itself changing, comment, "I've witnessed the power of perception" below. As we begin to live from this profound understanding that Jesus revealed when he said, "You are God's," something remarkable happens. The spiritual journey that once felt like an uphill battle transforms into a natural unfolding of your divine nature. You begin to experience life not as a separate human entity struggling to connect with divinity, but as divine expression, temporarily having a human experience. This revelation doesn't make life perfect or problem-free, but it fundamentally changes how you experience those challenges. You approach them from a completely different level of consciousness, from recognition of wholeness rather than from a sense of separation. and lack. And this makes all the difference. I share these teachings because I've witnessed their transformative power both in my own life and in the lives of countless others who have embraced this understanding. If this message resonated with you today, if you felt something stir within you as we explored what Jesus truly meant by "You are God's," I'd love to hear from you. Simply comment, "This truth awakened something in me, so I know this message found the right heart." If you found value in these insights, gently tap that like button. It helps others discover these transformative teachings who might be seeking exactly this understanding right now. And if you're not already part of our community, I invite you to subscribe and join us on this journey of spiritual awakening. Each week, we explore these profound truths that liberate us from limitation and reveal our divine nature. There's a video right here that takes this understanding even deeper, exploring how to apply this divine recognition in healing work. Click and continue with me there as we uncover more of what it means to live from the consciousness that you are God's. There comes a moment in the spiritual journey when the veil parts, and you discover that the great declaration was never meant to be a statement about a distant figure. It was an invitation into your own divine nature. When this understanding dawns, everything shifts. You cease searching outside yourself for completion. The frantic pursuit of validation, achievement, and security falls away like autumn leaves. You realize that the kingdom you've been seeking has always been within, not as a future promise, but as a present reality. This is not intellectual knowledge. It is a realization that transforms your entire being. You begin to understand that the I, at the center of your consciousness, is not the small, limited self you've identified with all these years. It is the very presence of God individualized as you. Not partly divine, not potentially divine, but wholly and completely divine right now. What happens when this truth penetrates your consciousness? You stop begging. You stop bargaining with an imaginary deity somewhere in the heavens. You cease the endless petitioning because you recognize that all that the Father has is already yours. The infinite storehouse is not locked away. It is your own consciousness. Fear begins to dissolve. How can you fear lack when you recognize yourself as the very outlet of infinite abundance? How can you fear disease when you understand that perfect life is the only reality? The illusions that have held you captive lose their power the moment you stop giving them the authority of belief. You become still, not the forced stillness of discipline, but the natural stillness that comes from knowing. In that stillness, you discover that you need not create good. You need only be aware of the good that already is. Your work is not to make something happen, but to let something be revealed. This is the great secret. You are not trying to reach God. You are the place where God is being expressed. Every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of awareness is the divine saying, "I am as you." When this becomes your living consciousness, you walk through the world differently. Circumstances no longer dictate your inner state. You carry within yourself the source of all supply, all wisdom, all peace. You become a transparency through which the infinite flows into visible form. This is the life you were meant to live, not as a seeker, but as a knower. The shift from external to internal reality, the realization that divinity is not outside but within your own consciousness, transforming the search for God from an external pursuit to an internal recognition. Recognition of your true identity, understanding that the I at your center is not the limited human self, but the presence of the infinite individualized as you, completely divine in this present moment. The end of supplication and fear, when you grasp your oneness with the source, begging and bargaining cease. Fear of lack and disease dissolves because you recognize yourself as the outlet of infinite supply and perfect life. From doing to being, the transition from striving and effort to stillness and awareness. Your work becomes not creating good, but recognizing the good that already exists and allowing it to be revealed through you. Living as transparency, not as seeker, moving from the role of spiritual seeker to knower, becoming a clear channel through which the infinite expresses itself in visible form, with circumstances no longer controlling your inner state. For most of your life, you have been trained to look outward. You were taught that answers lie in books, in teachers, in institutions, in sacred places far from where you stand. You were conditioned to believe that the divine dwells somewhere else, in temples, in heavens, in realms accessible only through intermediaries or complex rituals. This outward orientation has kept you perpetually searching, always reaching, never quite arriving. The spiritual marketplace thrives on this belief. It offers you methods, techniques, practices that promise to bridge the gap between you and the sacred. Attend this workshop. Follow this guru. Perform these ceremonies. Repeat these affirmations. All of it predicated on the assumption that you are fundamentally separated from your source, that you are incomplete, lacking, and must acquire something you do not currently possess. This is the great illusion that has held humanity in bondage for millennia. It creates a spiritual poverty consciousness where you see yourself as a beggar at the gates of abundance, a sinner seeking redemption, a fragment longing to return to wholeness. Every prayer becomes a petition. Every meditation becomes a striving. Every moment becomes evidence of your insufficiency. But there comes a sacred turning point. It often arrives not through more seeking, but through exhaustion with seeking. You have tried everything external. You have accumulated knowledge, attended countless gatherings, practiced endless techniques, and still the fundamental sense of separation remains. In that moment of surrender, when the external search collapses, something extraordinary can happen. You turn within, not as another technique, not as another place to search, but as a simple recognition. And in that inward turn, you discover what has always been present. The kingdom you sought in distant lands exists as your own consciousness. The presence you imagined dwelling in far-off realms is the very awareness with which you are aware. The divine you believed you had to reach is the life that is living you right now. This is not a metaphor. This is not poetry meant to inspire while leaving you unchanged. This is literal truth. The infinite intelligence that created galaxies, that orchestrates the perfect rhythm of seasons, that knows how to transform a seed into a redwood. This same intelligence is the consciousness at your center. Not a portion of it, not a reflection of it, but the very thing itself individualized as you. When this recognition dawns, the entire structure of your spiritual life reorganizes. You stop projecting your divinity onto external authorities. You cease giving away your power to those who claim to know more, to be more connected, to have special access to truth. You recognize that every teacher, every teaching, every sacred text can only point you back to what you already are. Your prayer life transforms completely. You no longer approach consciousness as a beggar approaches a king. You no longer catalogue your problems and present them to an external power hoping for intervention. Instead, prayer becomes recognition. Meditation becomes awareness. Spiritual practice becomes the simple acknowledgement of what is already true. The frantic quality dissolves. The spiritual anxiety that drove you from teacher to teacher, from practice to practice, loses its grip. Not because you have found the right external answer, but because you have discovered there is nowhere to go. The treasure was never buried in distant fields. It has always been in your own backyard. More accurately, it has always been you. This shift from external to internal is not a geographical change. It is a complete revolution in understanding. You realize that every moment you spent searching outside yourself was a moment spent denying your own nature. Every authority you elevated was a denial of the authority already resident in your own being. You have lived your entire life under a case of mistaken identity. You have believed yourself to be a limited creature bound by history, defined by circumstances, confined within the narrow parameters of personality and conditioning. You look in the mirror and see a name, a face, a story of successes and failures, of wounds and triumphs. You think this is who you are. But this person you believe yourself to be is only the surface, the outermost garment of your true nature. Beneath the accumulated layers of personal history, beneath the thoughts and emotions that rise and fall like waves, beneath even your deepest beliefs about yourself, there exists an I that has nothing to do with your biography. This is not the ego that defends itself, that compares itself to others, that fears inadequacy and craves recognition. This I existed before you were given a name. It will exist when all the details of your personal story have dissolved into forgotten memory. It is the witness that has been present through every experience of your life, unchanging while everything else changes. Most people spend their entire lives identified with the wrong I. They think they are the limited self, the one who was born and will die, the one who succeeds or fails, who is sick or well, who has or lacks. This misidentification is the root of all suffering. When you believe you are the limited self, you live in perpetual vulnerability. Everything becomes a potential threat to your existence, your security, your happiness. But there is another I, speaking in the depths of your being. It has been speaking all along, though its voice has been drowned out by the noise of personal concerns. This I doesn't I am sick, or I am poor, or I am afraid. It simply says I am, without qualification, without limitation, without any adjectives that would reduce infinity to something finite. This is not your personal identity speaking. This is the voice of the infinite itself, declaring its presence as you. When you touch this I, you discover that you are not a separate entity trying to connect with God. You are the very presence of God individualized, not a part of God, not a creation separate from the Creator, but God being God as you. This recognition shatters every limitation you have accepted. How can you be inadequate when your true nature is infinite intelligence? How can you lack anything when you are the substance of all supply? How can you be powerless when omnipotence is your very essence? The limitations exist only in the false identification with the small self, the personal sense of I. Understanding this intellectually changes nothing. Millions have heard these words and remained exactly as they were. But when this truth penetrates beyond the intellect into direct realization, when you actually experience yourself as this divine I am, everything transforms. You do not become divine. You recognize that you have never been anything else. The implications are staggering. It means that in this very moment, regardless of what appears in your experience, regardless of what circumstances surround you, regardless of what diagnosis you have received or what bank balance you carry, your true identity remains infinite, perfect, and complete. The divine is not your potential, it is your actuality. You are not becoming spiritual. You are recognizing what has always been true. This is why the great mystics speak with such certainty. They are not hoping, not believing, not having faith in something uncertain. They have discovered their true identity. They know who they are, And in that knowing, they have found an unshakable foundation that no circumstance can disturb, no condition can threaten, no experience can diminish. When you live under the belief that you are separate from your source, your entire life becomes an exercise in supplication. You approach each day with an underlying anxiety, a sense that something essential is missing and must be obtained from outside yourself. Your prayers become shopping lists presented to a distant power. Your spiritual practice becomes a form of bargaining. If I am good enough, devoted enough, faithful enough, perhaps I will receive what I need. This relationship with the divine mirrors the consciousness of poverty. You see yourself as lacking, and you imagine a great storehouse of supplies somewhere beyond your reach. Health exists, but you do not have it. Abundance exists, but it eludes you. Peace exists, but it remains outside your grasp, and so you beg, you plead, you promise. You perform religious duties hoping to earn favor, to tip the cosmic scales in your direction. But what happens when you recognize your true identity? When you understand that the infinite is not separate from you, but is actually constituting your very being? The entire foundation of supplication crumbles. How can you beg yourself for what you already are? How can you petition your own consciousness to give you what is already the substance of that consciousness? You begin to see that lack has never been a reality. It has only been a belief. The infinite cannot lack anything, and if the infinite is your true nature, then you cannot lack anything. Not potentially, not someday when you become more spiritual, but right now. The appearance of lack is nothing more than a failure to recognize what already is. This recognition dismantles fear at its root. Fear of poverty cannot survive the realization that you are infinite supply itself. Not that you have access to supply, not that supply will come to you if you think the right thoughts or perform the right actions, but that your very consciousness is the substance from which all form appears. How can substance lack anything? How can the source run dry? Fear of disease loses its power in the same way. When you understand that perfect life is not something you must acquire, but is the reality of your being, disease is recognized for what it is, a belief in something opposed to life, a temporary appearance accepted as real. You are not trying to get rid of disease, you are withdrawing the belief that gives it power. You are not trying to become healthy, you are recognizing the health that is already the truth of your being. Fear of death itself transforms. How can that which is infinite die? How can the eternal have a beginning or an ending? The person may appear and disappear, but the I am at your center is untouched by the cycles of birth and death. You recognize yourself as life itself, and life cannot die. It can only take different forms. This does not mean you become passive or fatalistic. Quite the opposite. You become immensely practical because you are no longer operating from fear and desperation. You make decisions from a place of inner abundance rather than outer lack. You take action not to fill a void, but to express the fullness that you are. The change is profound. Where there was anxiety, there is now peace. Where there was grasping, there is now allowing. Where there was the constant stress of trying to make something happen, there is now the restful awareness that everything necessary is already present. You stop living as a beggar and begin living as what you have always been. The very presence of infinite abundance expressing itself in individual form. Your relationship with circumstance changes completely. Conditions no longer have the power to disturb your inner knowing. A depleted bank account cannot convince you of poverty when you know yourself as infinite supply. A medical diagnosis cannot convince you of death when you know yourself as eternal life. The spiritual path, as it is commonly understood, is a path of doing. You are given practices to perform, techniques to master, disciplines to maintain. Meditate for this many minutes. Repeat these affirmations. Visualize these outcomes. Fast on these days. The underlying message is always the same. You must do something to achieve a spiritual state you do not currently possess. This approach keeps you perpetually engaged in effort. Your spiritual life becomes another form of work, another arena where you must perform, improve, and achieve. You measure your progress by how well you maintain your practices, how consistently you apply your techniques, how disciplined you remain in your efforts. And beneath it all runs the exhausting assumption that you are responsible for creating your own good. But something shifts when you recognize your true nature. The frantic doing begins to quiet. You start to understand that you are not trying to create good. Good already is. You are not trying to make something happen. Everything necessary is already present in consciousness. Your work is not to manufacture reality, but to perceive reality as it actually is. This is the movement from doing to being. It is not laziness. It is not passivity. It is actually the most profound activity possible, the activity of awareness itself. You begin to live from stillness rather than striving, not the forced stillness that comes from suppressing your thoughts or controlling your mind, but the natural stillness that arises when you stop believing you must make something happen. In this stillness, you discover something extraordinary. The good you have been working so hard to create has always been present. Health is already the truth of being. Supply is already infinite in consciousness. Harmony is already the nature of reality. These are not goals to be achieved in the future. They are facts to be recognized in the present moment. Your entire approach to life reorganizes around this recognition. Instead of beginning your day by making plans to create good, you begin by acknowledging the good that already is. Instead of looking at a problem and immediately thinking about what you must do to fix it, you pause and ask, what is the truth here? What is already present that I am not seeing? This does not mean you take no action in the world. You still engage with life, make decisions, participate in your affairs. But the action flows from a different source. It is no longer driven by fear or lack. It is no longer the desperate activity of someone trying to fill a void. It becomes the natural expression of the fullness that you are. You begin to understand the meaning of effortless effort. Things happen through you rather than by you. Solutions appear without the strain of forcing them. Doors open without the exhaustion of pushing them. Not because you have mastered some technique of manifestation, but because you have stopped blocking the natural flow of good with your beliefs in limitation. This is the great secret hidden in plain sight. Grace is not something you earn through effort. It is something you allow by ceasing to obstruct it. The infinite is always seeking to express itself as your individual experience. Your work is not to make this happen, but to remove the barriers of false belief that prevent you from seeing it. Prayer becomes something entirely different in this consciousness. You are not asking for things you lack. You are not trying to convince an unwilling deity to grant your requests. You are simply resting in the awareness of what is already true. You are acknowledging reality rather than begging for it to change. Meditation transforms from a practice you perform to a state you inhabit. You are not trying to achieve a special state of consciousness. You are simply being aware of the consciousness that is already present, already perfect, already complete. Most of your spiritual journey, you have been a seeker. This identity has defined you. You have read the books, attended the classes, followed the teachers, practiced the methods. You have been on a quest, searching for something you believed was missing, reaching for an experience you thought was just beyond your grasp. The seeker identity feels noble, dedicated, sincere, but it is actually the final barrier to realization. As long as you are seeking, you are affirming that you have not found. As long as you are trying to become spiritual, you are declaring that you are not spiritual now. The very act of seeking reinforces the illusion of separation. It keeps you forever in the future, forever approaching but never arriving, forever almost there but not quite. The transition from seeker to knower is not gradual. It is instantaneous. It happens in the moment you stop looking for what you already are. You realize that the consciousness seeking God is God seeking to know itself as you. The journey was never about going somewhere. It was about waking up to where you have always been. When you live as a knower rather than a seeker, everything changes. You stop collecting spiritual experiences like trophies. You stop measuring your progress against others. You stop worrying whether you are doing it right, whether you are spiritual enough, whether you have achieved the proper state. All of that anxiety belongs to the seeker, and you are no longer that. The knower does not claim to know everything. The knower simply rests in the awareness of their true identity. This knowing is not intellectual. You can have a library of spiritual knowledge and still be a seeker. Knowing is a state of consciousness, a recognition that has moved from the head to the heart, from theory to living experience. From this knowing, you become what the mystics call a transparency. You are no longer trying to be spiritual. You are simply allowing the infinite to be itself as you. Like a clear window pane does not create light, but allows light to pass through unobstructed. You do not create good, but allow the good that already is to flow into visible expression. This transparency is your natural state. You are not trying to become it. You are removing whatever blocks it. Every false belief you release, every limitation you stop accepting, every fear you see through makes you more transparent. Not more holy, not more advanced, simply more clear. More available for life to live itself as you. Living as transparency means circumstances lose their power over your inner state. The knower does not depend on conditions to be at peace. Peace is not found in situations. It is the nature of your being. When you know this, you can move through difficulty without being disturbed at your center. You can face challenges without losing your grounding, not because you have developed great spiritual strength, but because you have recognized what cannot be shaken. The world sees this and calls it wisdom, calls it grace, calls it spiritual attainment. But from the inside, it is simply being what you are. There is no effort in it. There is no maintenance required. You are not holding yourself in some elevated state that might collapse if you lose focus. You have simply recognized reality, and that recognition, once established, does not depend on your effort to sustain it. This is the life that becomes possible when seeking ends and knowing begins. You stop chasing experiences and start living from the one experience that matters, the recognition of your true identity. You stop trying to reach God and start being the place where God is expressed. You move through the world not as someone looking for the sacred, but as someone who has discovered that the sacred is looking through your eyes. This entire journey from seeker to knower, from doing to being, from outer dependence to inner recognition, this is the unfoldment of consciousness that changes everything. It is not a destination you will reach someday. It is an awakening available in this very moment. You stand now at the threshold. Not the threshold of something you must attain, but the threshold of something you must recognize. Behind you lies the exhausting path of seeking, striving and supplication. Before you lies the rest that comes from knowing. The choice is not difficult. It requires only that you stop, turn within, and acknowledge what has always been true. When you live from this inner knowing, you discover that you have become a benediction to the world, not through great works or mighty achievements, but simply by being transparent to the infinite. Your very presence becomes a healing influence because you are no longer broadcasting the consciousness of lack, fear, and limitation. You are radiating the peace that comes from recognizing your true nature. This is the message that has echoed through the ages, spoken in different words by every mystic who has ever awakened. You are not what you have believed yourself to be. You are not the limited, lacking, fearful creature of personal sense. You are the infinite itself, expressing as individual being. Take this truth into the silence of your own consciousness. Let it work in you, not as something to be accomplished, but as something to be realized. And in that realization, you will discover what the great teachers have always known: the kingdom of heaven is not coming. It is here. The divine presence is not distant. It is you. The life you have been seeking to live has been living you all along. I am. And in those two words, spoken in the depth of your being, lies all the truth you will ever need to know.